back to another edition of the Suffolk Insider. I'm Di Pajeski.
And I'm Josh DePio. Let's start off this edition of the Suffolk Insider brought to you by the Department of Communications and Journalism and Studio 73. With the top headlines from the Suffolk Journal, what do we have for the news section this week, Di?
Thanks for that, Josh. Well, Election Day is tomorrow, and Suffolk Votes is encouraging voter participation in an upcoming general election. The Pew Research Center reported that young Americans ages 18 through 25 have now become the largest voting demographic in the U.S., giving them significant power over election results. Suffolk Votes is assisting with voter registration and providing students with important voting information. In other news, Suffolk student Nicholas Fernandez recently launched two new business ventures, Memsy and Credit Sage. Memsy, a menstrual hygiene subscription, launched earlier this month. Credit Sage is a credit reporting and repair service which opened in October of 2019. Suffolk University's Bollywood fusion dance team, Fusion Dhamaka, had started their season strong and confident despite the limitations clubs have faced due to COVID-19. The club focuses on the cultural combination of Bollywood and K-pop dance. What's new at SGA, Josh?
Thanks, Di. Two SGA senators resigned after one of them made a controversial statement regarding diversity on a student podcast. Read more about this story written by Suffolk Journal editors and staff on the Suffolk Journal website. As we reported on the last edition of the Suffolk Insider, SGA passed a resolution to make Election Day, November 3rd, a school holiday. Well, that became official on October 28th as President Marissa Kelly announced in her blog post Momentum that all classes will be canceled on Election Day. President Kelly said that the decision will allow for students to participate in numerous ways beyond voting, as poll workers, as campaignees for a candidate, or as observers for the political process. She also cautioned students to take the proper health and safety precautions, and that will be necessary with the recent uptick in COVID-19 cases.
And on that note, let's transition to a brand new segment, Suffolk COVID Watch. Suffolk saw 21 new COVID cases on the week of October 17th, which was the largest increase in cases since the university started testing in August. This brings the total number of cases to 56. The global case count for COVID-19 has now surpassed 43 million, with the US leading the world with 8.74 million cases and 225,000 deaths.
Thanks, Di. Let's not forget to mask up, wash our hands, and social distance. Moving on, while Pride Month is celebrated in June to recognize the Stonewall riots of 1969 and those who lost their lives to the HIV/AIDS epidemic, October was LGBTQ History Month. The month was first designated by a group of teachers in '94, and a year later, the National Education Association passed a resolution making October an official commemorative month. And with that, I will now toss it over to Will Woodring for this week's edition of the Writer's Corner segment, where he will be discussing the evolution of Suffolk over the years.
Thanks, Josh. I'm Will Woodring, a staff writer for the Suffolk Journal. This week on Writer's Corner, I will be talking about my story, a look back on how Suffolk University's campus has changed. While it may seem a distant memory for most, Suffolk's campus has changed drastically since it first opened. In fact, many of the buildings that today's students are familiar with are relatively new. Suffolk University started as an evening law school back in 1906, and the first classes were held at the school's founder, Gleason Archer's apartment. From 1907 until 1914, classes moved between various rented spaces in downtown Boston. In 1914, the university bought its first permanent building at 45 Mount Vernon Street. This location quickly proved to be too small, and the university built a larger building at the corner of Dern Street and Temple Street in 1921. The cornerstone of this building was laid by future President Calvin Coolidge, who was the governor of Massachusetts at the time. The building went under several renovations and was later named the Archer Building after the university's founder. Also a part of the Archer Building was the C. Walsh Theater, which housed the university's theater department. The theater held most of the Suffolk students' productions starting in 1936 and was an important part of campus life. In 1966, the university opened a new building, the Donahue Building, and moved most law classes to this new location. These two buildings were an important part of the Suffolk community and remained in use until the university announced that they would be sold in 2015. While these buildings were sold relatively recently, most current Suffolk students have never taken classes in or even heard of the Archer and Donahue Building. The buildings were purchased by JDMD Owner LLC, an affiliate of the Center Court Properties, for $43.5 million. The Dedham, Mass. company planned to open luxury condos at the location. The Donahue and Archer buildings were an important part of student life. However, moving forward was an important step for the university. Since the buildings were sold, Suffolk has opened a number of new facilities, including the 1 Court Street Residence Hall and 20 Somerset, now known as the Samia Academic Center. Most of the classes formerly held in the Archer and Donahue buildings have now been moved to the Samia Academic Center, and the theater department is now located at the Modern Theater. While Donahue and Archer are no longer a part of the university, their legacy left an impact on the Suffolk community. That's it for this week's edition of Writer's Corner. Back to you guys.
Thanks for that awesome story, Will. It's fascinating to see Suffolk's history. Moving on in the world news section, Azerbaijan forces attacked the Nagorno-Karabakh region, a predominantly ethnic Armenian territory of Azerbaijan in late September. This attack sparked a series of military exchanges between Azeri troops with the support of Turkey and Armenian freedom fighters from the region. These events have sparked protests here in Boston demanding justice for Armenia.
A Venezuelan vessel is stranded in the Caribbean, leaving many concerned over the possibility of an oil spill. According to CBS News, the tanker is carrying 80 million pounds of oil and is beginning to lean to one side.
A French teacher was beheaded after showing caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad in his class earlier this month. 47-year-old history teacher Samuel Paty was beheaded outside the school he worked in a town northwest of Paris.
Student-led protests demanding democratic reforms in Thailand have broken out against the government, sparking more protests throughout the country. Reuters reported that protests began in March, but lulled as Thailand grappled with COVID-19. In July, the movement made a resurgence, with protests popping up across various provinces this past week.
On September 22nd, China pledged to go carbon neutral by 2060. According to Science magazine, China produces 28% of emissions, making it the largest producer of carbon dioxide in the world.
In the arts and culture section, the theater department held their first show of the semester, Together Apart. The virtual performance was held on October 22nd, 23rd, and the 24th on Vimeo, and featured a cast of 25 students. The show peeked behind the mask of a Zoom theater support group during quarantine. That's it for this edition of the Suffolk Insider.
For more in-depth and up-to-date on-campus news coverage, be sure to check out the Suffolk Journal website, and don't forget to tune in to our next edition on November 16th. Thanks for watching.